Thank you, sir. On the occasion of about 10 years of our program being in existence, you start to get a little misty-eyed and think about all the things you've learned over this last decade. And I'd be remiss if I didn't spend some time focusing on the anglers and their role in the success of our program. So I wanted to make sure that I address that topic at least once. And a perfect example here, little Z-Man Cole, he caught this 100-pound paddlefish, and in the same day he actually hooked a sturgeon in Oklahoma. So that was pretty remarkable. So these guys drove all the way from Georgia to fish in Oklahoma for paddlefish. As a little preview of what I'm going to tell you about today, I'm going to focus on the human aspects of our paddlefish fisheries in Oklahoma, give you a little bit of a primer on our program development and how anglers are an important component in that. Give you a little glimpse at what we've learned about the anglers over the course of 10 years and how we've used their feedback and the information they've provided to craft appropriate harvest regulations to preserve angler opportunity while moderating harvest. So present a sustainable fishery for them. Back in 2008, we opened up the Paddlefish Research Center, which is kind of a big deal. It's founded basically on the premise that we utilize angler harvested specimens to perform stock assessment and to learn about the fishery in order to properly manage that fishery. And it's funded in part through the donation of paddlefish roe, which we convert into caviar and sell to help fund the program. But of course, we're acquiring a lot of data in the process. But this is all founded on the principle that we're collaborating with our anglers. They're providing us research specimens, we're providing them a service to clean their fillets, and we've been able to develop a paddlefish management plan throughout this process, and it focuses on the objective of utilizing the anglers as a stakeholder in that process. One of the first steps to effectively utilizing the anglers was to find out who they are. So we had to establish a permit for paddlefish angling in Oklahoma. It's simply a free license addendum. It's required to pursue paddlefish, but it identified who our paddlefish anglers are, opened up those lines of communication so we can administer surveys and find out what they're catching, what they're looking for, who they are. It also simplified enforcement because only paddlefish permit holders can pursue the fish in Oklahoma. One of the key benefits of that permit is the ability to survey our anglers, which we've done numerous times over the last decade. We've learned a whole lot about their demographics, how much they catch, how much they keep statewide. What do they understand about the regulations? Are they complying with them? What are they looking for? Are they satisfied with the fishery we're presenting to them? What are their attitudes, motivations, etc., and how can we meet that while meeting our own goals at the same time? But that survey is not the only source of feedback we have, and I just wanted to give sort of a glimpse at, over the years of our program, how many anglers have we actually contacted or received data or information from on an annual basis. And some years we're approaching 10,000 anglers. Of course, there's some overlap in there. Some anglers are surveyed and creeled possibly the same year, but we have multiple sources of information, including mail surveys, creel surveys, e-check, and simply the anglers that are harvesting fish at our research center. It's interesting to note that state agencies like our own have been struggling with funding nationwide due to declines in licensed sales over a long period of time. Nationally, we've seen a 4% decline from 1991 to 2017. However, Oklahoma has been fortunate in that we have not seen this trend. We've actually seen a 10% increase in fishing license sales over this period. And some of that increase can potentially be attributed to paddlefish angling in Oklahoma. However, it's pretty evident that we've shown some pretty dramatic growth in the sport in Oklahoma. approximately 15,000 active paddlefish anglers in 2008 when we started our program, grew by 67% up to approximately 25,000 paddlefish anglers in Oklahoma in 2015. And over that same period of time, the Oklahoma fishing sales only grew by 15%. So this is a very dramatic growth in the sport of paddlefish angling in Oklahoma, and it's kind of an interesting scenario where we've created a destination fishery, and we really need to learn and understand what we're doing. And of course, speaking to our anglers is a critical component there. Over the history of our program, we have received anglers to Oklahoma from all but 5 states in the United States and several Canadian provinces. Oddly, we're not recruiting anglers from that part of the country for some reason. We may want to work on a little campaign to draw in some New England anglers, but these people are traveling long distances to come to Oklahoma to catch paddlefish. The average distance traveled in 2018 was 194 miles, ranging up to approximately 1,500 miles to come catch a paddlefish in Oklahoma. And that's pretty spectacular. That tells you we got something special going on. So this is a glimpse of how those anglers cluster out. Obviously, it's a regional fishery where we're really drawing people from the neighboring states. However, it's also interesting to note that we're drawing a lot of anglers from states that have paddlefish. So they're potentially leaving their home state that has the same species where they can catch it and driving to Oklahoma to catch paddlefish. So what kind of impacts does that have? Of course, economically, it has a great impact on Oklahoma because our out-of-state anglers are coming in and spending $500 a trip, which is a lot more than our in-state anglers, resulting in an annual economic value of $12.7 million, creating 193 jobs, and having an economic impact of over $18 million. That's a big deal in Oklahoma. And it's a fishery that we didn't create the fishery, but we certainly promoted it and have cultivated it. Well, as you can imagine, a growing fishery can't grow unchecked. You have to have responsive management. So getting back to our paddlefish management plan, one of those objectives, of course, is to, however we regulate this resource, we need to preserve opportunity while moderating harvest. We want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to catch paddlefish in Oklahoma, but to do it sustainably. So we took an informed approach, looking at all of our sources of angler feedback and using that feedback to sort of develop appropriate responses to what we're learning. And eventually, given several years of data, we were able to come up with a strategic reboot, is what I call it, in 2014, where having enough data at that point, we could determine what the appropriate course of action is for sustainable fishing. One of the early things we learned pretty quickly was that there are certain locations where paddlefish were highly vulnerable to capture. That was something we could fairly simply address. Now, as you can see in the figure on the bottom left, this particular area, the Spring River, is the headwater river of one of our large reservoirs, and we saw a dramatic increase in the number of fish harvested from that section over the course of 1 year. So anglers figured out where to catch fish, exploitation went way up. One thing we could do is we actually closed that. We had to keep it sporting, and we got rid of some user conflicts that way. We also learned that, of course, this is a popular destination fishery, and a lot of our anglers are non-residents, as I mentioned. They had a daily limit of 1 and a possession limit of 4. One thing we could do to limit non-resident harvest was to create a couple days of catch and release. So we bookended the weekends with catch and release only days. So non-resident anglers coming into town typically could keep 4 fish. Now they can only keep 2 because 2 of those days are catch and release only. And that was due to the fact that our anglers told us the fun of catching fish was twice as important to them as harvest was. So we knew that we could cut their harvest and they would still have a lot of fun. So 2 days a week, catch and release only. You think about that, that's a very substantial harvest reduction in what could be taken out on an annual basis. Through our angler feedback, we've also learned they have changed a lot over the years. They've changed their behaviors, they've changed their motivations. One key thing is that over the decade of surveys, 63% of our anglers now identify themselves as boat anglers versus bank anglers, and that's a big deal. So that requires a different type of management. They've gotten better at catching paddlefish. By using boats, they're using high-tech sonar, they're targeting fish, they have better technology. They've also expanded the fishery in time and space. We got anglers using boats and sonar catching paddlefish in November, whereas before the fishery only started in earnest in March. So it's expanding harvest, expanding opportunities, which has impacts on the resource. They're also doing this in deeper waters in our reservoirs using equipment like dipsy divers. This is a technique pioneered by our guides. So they're trolling in 50 feet of water, pulling paddlefish up. It's really quite a sight. So in order to deal with some of these changes, we have to sort of respond through our harvest management. So after several years of learning a lot about the anglers, doing surveys, we sort of transitioned into formulating a strategic framework of harvest management. One of the key observations we had was that we had a minority of our harvesting anglers, only 16%, kept more than 2 fish a year. However, they were responsible for a huge chunk of the total harvest, 40%. So as an example, we had individual anglers in 2008 keeping 22 fish per person. That's not sustainable. However, it was only a few anglers, so we knew we could make a change and have a big impact, but only impact very few people. So we came up with an individual annual limit of two paddlefish per angler per year. And that's a huge drop in the potential number of fish one person can keep. If you do the math, it's 260 down to 2 if you were good enough to catch a fish every day, every non-catch and release day. We also mandated harvest reporting through e-check. So over time, what has this done to our anglers? It looks like we've had a bit of a decline in catch efficiency. However, it's non-significant. Within these different periods of regulation and within different environmental conditions, such as flood or drought, which have affected fishing, we really don't see much change in catch efficiency. However, we do see that boat angling leads to higher success than bank angling. So given that we have a lot of anglers now identifying as boat anglers, we're potentially masking a little bit of a decline in catch rate. So despite all this, are they still satisfied despite varying ecological conditions? We find that they are. Just a sort of a glimpse over time, 2009 compared to 2018, various unlisted questions. How satisfied are you with X, Y, and Z? Our anglers are very satisfied. Actually, they're increasing in satisfaction. So this communication we've had with anglers and seeking their feedback has resulted in maintaining satisfaction despite some pretty heavy-handed regulations we put down. Just to even look at the worst possible scenario, 2014, where we had an extreme drought, fishing was terrible, and we also put in some pretty strict harvest regulations that year. We still saw that 53% of our anglers overall were satisfied or very satisfied. So even if we're driving it to them ecologically and through regulations, they're still having a good time. So luckily, we're doing the right things, it seems. We've also done some tricky things in our surveys. For example, we did kind of a self-assessment. We knew that they had to report their harvest online, so we asked them after we put that regulation in, did you harvest a fish and did you report it? Well, 48% of the respondents did not report it, so they admitted to breaking the law. Meanwhile, they also self-reported that they understand the regulations. So this sort of pointed to the fact that maybe we can do a better job at educating our anglers, and we need to really focus on that communication and making sure they understand why we're making changes and how they can participate in that. We also identified a little bit of bias. Just briefly, 58% of our respondents agreed that the regulations that we've crafted are to benefit paddlefish populations. However, they still have a little bit of selfish flair in there, and they say, well, 23% of those people think there's not enough fish for me. So my priorities do weigh into this equation, even though you're regulating this for sustainability. So that's kind of interesting, we thought. And just to kind of bring it all to a close, the whole point here is that we've sort of built this program while investing our anglers in the process. And so we've tried to build and foster trust with our anglers. Before our program existed, their only interaction with the wildlife department was a warden with a ticket book. So initially there was some kickback, and I'm going to present a couple free-form survey angler comments just to sort of demonstrate the evolution of our relationship with these anglers. So first off, the biologists are just trying to protect their jobs. That's why they're regulating this resource. But then over time, they sort of come to realize, I would like to see my children enjoy this animal. So they're identifying the value of the resource and how the wildlife department plays a role in managing that resource. And then the culmination, they realize that it's ODWC's job to protect the paddlefish for the benefit of not only the resource, but of future generations of Oklahomans. And they realize that it takes a little bit of caution to do that. We have to sort of reduce harvest and regulate how much our anglers can take out of the resource. So we're pretty pleased with the fact that we've been able to foster this trust and build this relationship with our anglers. And it has really informed us as managers on how to do this responsibly. And so with that, I'd like to open up for questions.